The USS Discovery crew really needs to play more video games, because if I learned anything from video games, it's that ancient ruins are incredibly dangerous and will most likely shoot lasers at you. At least that's what I learned from playing Breath of the Wild. What did you learn? Hello interwebs, I hope you're all doing well, and I am here to review the second episode of the 2-episode premiere of Star Trek Discovery's 5th and final season, this one titled Under the Twin Moons. And as per usual, I will give spoiler-free thoughts for this episode up front and then get into spoilers in the back half. But that being said, I will be talking about some of the stuff that happened at the end of the premiere episodes of this season. So if you have not watched the premiere episode or my review yet, go check those out, because just by nature of how that episode ends and going into this episode, we'll have to spoil the big revelation at the end of the premiere. So that is your spoiler warning for the spoiler-free section, so let's just get into it. This was another great episode that built off of the promise of that Indiana Jones treasure hunting vibe that the premiere sold us on, and I had a ton of fun with it. This episode brings us to another exotic locale in ancient ruins with some cool puzzle finding elements that you get in things like Indiana Jones that tie into Star Trek history in a really fun way, and I deeply enjoyed it overall. Again, my major issue with the premiere kind of follows through here in that we get a lot of action sequences in this episode, one major one that is mostly just described to us in terms of what's going on rather than actually giving us a good sense of the geography of everything. But that being said, I do think that this episode does it much better, considering that even within all of that action stuff, there's much more character beats going on here that actually had me really worried for one character in particular on if they would survive or not. And for a Star Trek show to really make me worry about a character's survival when they are a main character of the series is actually, I think, a really great feat. I was really desperately worried for them, and I think that that builds off the fact that this is the final season for Discovery, which leads into my next thing that I really loved about this episode, in that it really feels like it is setting up this season and show as a final season. And that surprises me, because I don't think when they were filming the show, according to the timeline of events, that they knew that this was officially going to be the final season of Discovery, but I have to think that they must have had some inkling of that, because this episode especially really had some vibes of feeling like this was kind of wrapping up some emotional beats for our characters. There are great moments specifically between Burnham and Saru, as well as a couple other things here and there that felt like a good capstone to these characters and these storylines so far, with some callbacks going back all the way to the first ever season. There are actual subtler things going on in this episode, particularly with the character of Captain Raynor, who we got introduced to last episode, that I also think are intriguing callbacks to season 1 as well, that I think will ultimately, if they go in the direction that I think they will ultimately be an interesting parallel and commentary to some stuff from season 1, but I'll talk about that more in the spoiler-filled section. Overall, though, I think this is a solid episode that still is plagued by a couple of the action sequence problems that I had with last episode, but I think wonderfully is building on the promise of that adventure-style story that I really hope the rest of the season just carries all the way through, because I think it's really fun, feels fresh, feels unique, and I am hoping for more of it. All of that being said, though, let us move into the spoiler-filled section, so if you have not seen the episode yet, you can jump ship here. Go, shoo, spore drive away, fly, you fools. That's a different franchise. Wait, actually, can you make that work? Like, because Burnham says, let's fly, you fool. Burnham and Gandalf just need to meet. That's really the long and short of it. I'm actually really here for that crossover. Anyways, let's actually talk spoilers. As per usual, I'm going to go chronologically through the episode and talk about all the stuff that I found interesting, and we start off the episode with Burnham looking at one of the pictures of the progenitors from the episode The Chase, and her ruminating on this idea of purpose. And I really love this discussion, especially if this means that this is going to be the overall theme for the series. And we're kind of already seeing these threads of purpose and meaning already seeded throughout our characters' arcs so far. We have Stamets wondering about his purpose as a scientist now that the spore drive has been scuttled. We also have Saru choosing a new purpose by being an ambassador with Durin. Raynor also has dealing with his sense of purpose and selfhood here. And I really hope that this season gets into this idea of our purpose is not what is told to us by those who created us or larger institutions, but what we choose for ourselves. That is something that Discovery, even going back to its first season, has always been about, with the whole show being that the people of Starfleet make up the values of Starfleet, not Starfleet as an institution dictating them, because institutions can be corrupted, as we saw with characters like Lorca way back in that season. And one of the major issues that I've had with shows like Strange New Worlds, even though I do really like Strange New Worlds, is that sometimes it venerates Starfleet as an institution at the expense of the people who make it up. We saw that very clearly with characters like Ortegas back in Strange New Worlds, where she said, you know, like her identity was tied into her function for Starfleet.
I'm Erica Ortegas. I fly the ship.
And then also the song in the musical episode of We Know Our Purpose Is to Protect the Mission.
We know our purpose. We know our purpose to protect the mission.
I talked about that in a larger essay that I did on my main channel, but while I do love that show, that's my major issue with it, is that it tends to uphold Starfleet as an institution and Star Trek as a franchise and canon over the individual characters allowing to be their best selves, when Starfleet and Star Trek should always be about these institutions enabling us to be ourselves rather than the other way around. And so if this show, this season of Discovery, is kind of doing the reverse of that theme, where it's talking about, well, the progenitors may have made us, but they don't get to dictate who we are, and that also filtering out into our own individual character arcs and they're sort of reconciling with what they're going to choose for their purpose and their selfhood, I think is a great sense of finding your own identity that resonates on a queer level, not just like queer sexuality, but like queer themes of like people getting to be ourselves despite what the world tells us to be. I think that just fits Discovery really well, and I think is a nice antithesis to some of the criticisms that I had for other Star Trek shows at the time. So love that as a potential jumping off theme for the season. The other theme that we get this episode too that has started off here is how we find meaning through our relationships with others and how those change over time, such as with Saru leaving the Discovery and Burnham sort of trying to have one last dance, as she says at one point in the episode, with him to sort of think about the relationship and how it's changed and evolved over time and how it's changing now, as well as her relationship with Book as well and how their relationship has changed, sometimes for the negative, and can they find their way back to what they had before. Two sides of the coin there, and that being mirrored in the Maul and Lock storyline, who are kind of reflections of Book and Burnham's relationship as well, in more ways than one that we'll get into in just a little bit. All of these are really great themes and ideas that I'm excited for Discovery to explore that are all really set off and just jumped into this episode. Also, I should say, Saru being on one last mission with Burnham that is set up in this scene had me really, really worried for Saru, because I'm like, maybe he dies this episode. He's one mission from retirement, as they say. So I'm like, oh, please do not kill Saru. They're giving all these like nice, wonderful moments between him and Burnham, and I'm like, please no, you can't kill my little babies, my little Kelpian guy. So I was worried about that. We then, however, get into an inquiry into Raynor's behavior last episode with the potential destruction of the city on Kumal. First off, I was a little uncomfortable with Burnham sort of being loyal to Raynor and not wishing to voice her criticisms of him in front of the council. I get that it speaks well to her to a degree that she is trying to protect her fellow comrade and colleague, so I understand that loyalty, but there is something that even Vance points out, that there's this unofficial code of conduct of like, you don't speak out when you have disagreements or someone put people in danger, that rang a little bit like how the police tend to do that there's an unofficial police code of conduct where they will not speak out against other police officers who may have done bad things because they're trying to protect each other under the vagueness of loyalty. So again, it's like, it feels true that Starfleet officers would have that sense of loyalty to them, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing overall. You know, maybe I'm being overly sensitive to it, your mileage may vary, but it was just sort of like I would have rather Burnham being like, look, I don't mean to throw you under the bus, but like these are my thoughts and criticisms, and I think, you know, speak highly of him, like if you have like praise of him, but also don't hide your criticisms under the veil of loyalty. That was sort of my feeling on it. All that being said, we do get a great analysis of Raynor here, where we see that he is someone who really brushes up against any level of authority above him, but he is very self-centered and kind of has an authoritarian style as well, that he likes to dictate how things are done. He doesn't like to have his hands tied. He will do whatever he thinks is necessary. And what it reminded me most of in terms of his characterization was actually Lorca way back from season 1 when he was pretending to be from the Federation. Not Mirror Universe Lorca, where he went full fascist, but the more authoritarian style we had when we thought he was Prime Universe Lorca. And I think that that is a fascinating place for this character to start out on, considering that he seems like he's going to be a character throughout this whole season. And it kind of presents to me like, oh, this will be an interesting way for the show to comment on Lorca as a character from season 1, and show how Burnham has changed as a character in terms of how she is able to influence and change someone like Lorca, when back in season 1 she was really unable to do so, and Lorca was more an antithesis to Burnham and the Federation. But here we can see, oh, maybe Raynor can choose a different purpose, choose something different, and kind of have an opposite arc to Lorca, who became more fascist as the season went along. Raynor may have an opposite choice here. And I think that'll be a really fascinating just parallel for a final season of Discovery. So I'm really excited for that setup. And I do like here that we get Vance saying, like, he was a good officer, but times have changed. We're in a time of peace right now, and not seeing everyone as the enemy, as Raynor consistently talks about this episode. He sees everyone as, like, think like the enemy, but you don't have enemies right now necessarily, so where does he fit, and how can he change in that mindset, even though he was a good officer during a time where the Federation was much more insulated, had many more threats like the Emerald Chain way back in season 3 of the show. All of this is really fascinating setup for me, but I did at this point think, well, I do want to see Raynor being kind of a good guy, because he's kind of been mostly an asshole, and we do get that in just a little bit, so let's jump into that. We get also quick little scenes between Book and Burnham, and we can see that their relationship is still kind of professional. They haven't really reconnected, but there is elements of that playfulness there with the little mouse that Burnham, which is clearly a setup for Grudge. And again, I was curious what happened to Grudge. Like, did Book take Grudge with him or not? And Burnham still being on the outs with Grudge, so I loved that. But then her saying, oh, that mouse is for you. I think that's adorable. I want a holographic mouse for my cat, Kipo. I think he would love the crap out of that. But Grudge, you know, is a queen. She doesn't have time for such lowly mice chasing. This sets us off on a storyline where Book investigates Maul and Lock alongside Culber and later Stamets, and we get throughout these investigations that Book is kind of seeing a little bit of a mirror in Maul and Lock to his relationship with Burnham, in that Maul and Lock love each other and are a bit of thrill seekers, but they find, you know, purpose in each other. And Book right now, and Burnham as well, kind of don't have that opposing force as they used to be for each other, and how Book sort of feels different as a result. But also we get to see his difference as a courier. He's changed from who he was. He's been much more aligned with Federation and Starfleet than he was in season 3, and that sort of makes Maul look at him differently than what you would with other couriers. She says at one point, you're speaking a lot of Federation, makes me not believe that you're a courier at this point. So I thought all of that was really fascinating, and Culber worrying about Book's feelings throughout all of this fits his character as like the honorary psychologist therapist of the ship, and that was a lot of fun. I also love that Book is able to get a contact on Maul and Lock because he's able to think like they are, kind of like how Raynor is able to think like the enemy later on in this episode as well. So there's some parallels between all of these characters going on and how they relate to Burnham as like opposing forces. And I thought all of that was really fascinating, especially going into this theme of, you know, how we're defined by each other, that Maul kind of says at one point. It's like all we need is each other instead of having other people around us. And sort of going to this idea of like how each of us sort of interact with the people in our lives and create family. So just really interesting connections of all these themes and characterizations in very subtle ways that I really, really enjoyed. The one thing with this storyline, though, that I will say I'm hesitant on, but we'll give them some leeway and slack to see what they do with it, is the revelation that Maul is actually a distant relative of Book. And the reason I'm hesitant on this is that it does sort of create a small universe syndrome, in that, like, of course, of all the people in the entire universe that they could be going up against, of course it's someone that is related to Book of all people. So I'm like, that kind of does create a little bit of that, like, oh, everyone's related to everybody feel that I wish Star Trek would kind of get out of. It does tend to do that from time to time, especially in its modern iterations. That being said, though, the reason I'm willing to give them some slack is this does actually create some interesting thematic ties through all of the stuff that I said before, as well as ties into some of the stuff that Book has been going through since last season, given that he lost his family due to species, what was the species? 10C, I think it was. I wanted to say 8472, but that's Voyager. Species 10C. And so him finding connections to other people, I think, again, will fit thematically, but will also tie into his own core trauma in interesting ways. So if they do something good with this storyline, I'm willing to like let go of my worry of small universe syndrome. But it is like a hesitation that I have with that cropping up here. Moving on, though, we also get to learn that Saru has a nickname, Action Saru, which I thought was adorable because of his quills. We get to see that later on in this episode. I'm like, oh, look, it's Action Saru. It's kind of fun. And again, creates that family feel. But more importantly, we go to this planet, Promelian, which has these ancient ruins because, of course, if you're going to have an Indiana Jones-style adventure, you got to have ancient ruins to uncover some weird little text and solve a puzzle while you're under duress from some ancient traps with a little Star Trek flavor considering they're like laser drones. I thought all of that was fun. Seeing the like weird alien heads with the lasers coming out of it and the drones coming out of it was a lot of fun. All of that worked well for me, but more importantly on a character level, what I really did enjoy was the moments between Burnham and Saru, with them talking about their past together, how much they have grown. Again, this goes into me feeling like this has a final season vibe, even if they didn't know that this was a final season going into it, because this felt like a good kind of capstone on their relationship. And I'm sure Burnham and Saru will have more scenes throughout the season, but this felt like, oh, if this is where they ended, with callbacks to, Burnham, having grown since her mutiny in season 1, and their relationship have grown, even callbacks to season 2, where Saru went through his Vihari, where we get at the end of the episode a callback to that in Saru's amazing quarters. I still love the very botanical Saru's quarters that we get to see from time to time. Beautiful. Always. Those callbacks I thought were very beautiful and felt very poignant. And again, going to this themes of how Saru has been such a great first officer, or at times captain, and comrade to Burnham, as someone who will call her out, but also has a deep caring for her, and they have a great respect for each other and see good in each other even when they falter. And so I thought all of that was really, really beautifully evoked. But again, had me very worried for Saru when he had to go and like run away from those drones. And again, we got to see Action Saru running, and reminded me of season 1 in that one episode, that Way Team episode, way back in season 1, where we got to see CGI Saru running, which was very funny. Very badly done there. Here it's much better. And just made me all think about all of those things. But I was worried that he was going to possibly die in this sequence, because I'm like, this feels like a finale, but of course they didn't. Thank heavens. We still got to have we gotta have a Kelpian wedding, all right, by the end of the season. I need that between him and Turin. But the other thing that happened in this sequence was Adir and Tilly were trying to save Burnham and Saru during the drone strikes that were going off against them, and Raynor coming in and telling them to think like the enemy. And again, I like this because, number one, it shows that he is a character who does actually try to help. He cares about other people. He may be gruff and an asshole, but he's not someone who's like, I'm gonna get mine, show these people what's up. He actually does care to try and save lives and get the mission done. However, at the same time, it shows his mindset, which is he sees everyone as an enemy, which is again something Lorca thought of everyone as. And so now in a time of peace, can he change to be a different person in a way that Lorca didn't? So great setup for his character. It set him up as a guy who does care about others, but still has that sort of more authoritarian us versus them mindset that potentially we might be able to break down through his interactions with forming relationships with our Discovery crew members. So excited for that. The only negative I have during this whole sequence is, again, it's a lot of narration of what's happening. Like, oh, we can technobabble this thing. Oh, we're hiding underneath this rock. We're not really moving. There's not a lot of dynamicism. It's just a bunch of CGI drones running around, as opposed to like more specifically articulated and choreographed action sequences. So I was a little disappointed in that aspect of it. But that's going to be a consistent probably problem with not only just Star Trek Discovery, but a lot of Star Trek nowadays. Picard Season 3 and even Season 2 and 1 had this problem as well. Strange New Worlds has it to a degree as well, though that's a less action-heavy show. But it does still have that problem from time to time. In the end, though, Saru and Burnham are able to figure out a secret 5th verse to this Romulan poem that even Maul and Lock did not find, despite their attempts to try to phaser it off. And I love that we get some quick little ties into Romulan lore that have pre-existed this episode to be able to solve this puzzle. It felt very Indiana Jones again, like I said before, but with a Star Trek flavor. So this idea that, oh, Romulans don't trust people, they have a door in the back, attack to let people in. Again, stuff that we've all heard in other Star Trek episodes, but then leading to them finding the hidden clue at the base of the statue was really, really fun, leading them to be able to find that they actually need to go to Trill, not to Beta Z, where Maul and Lock think that they will find the next clue. So fun little way to get our characters ahead in the treasure hunt scenario going on here. So that was a lot of fun, and will certainly set us up for some Adira and Gray drama that we sort of got set up within this episode, because of course Adira and Tilly talk, and Adira says that they are feeling a little bit on the outs with Gray. So curious to see where that will go next episode. Also, we got a quick little mention of Tilly being an instructor at the academy here, and she's saying, oh, I love working in the academy. It's like, I'm sure you do, Tilly, being able to go off into the spin-off show that they're doing with Starfleet Academy. It's like, yeah, I still have a job, which I'll be glad to see Tilly in that show if she is in that show. They haven't officially announced that or not, if Mary Wiseman's going to be in it, but I was just sort of laughing at that. The episode ends, though, with Vance telling Burnham that Rayner is a good guy. Trust me, he's a good dude, but, you know, he needs to retire because this is a time of peace and he's not really fit for it. But then Burnham going and making him her first officer, which is interesting to me. Like, on the one hand, it's like, why this guy? He's shown to be a bit of an asshole, and you probably could pick someone better. But I do like that it's justified in the sense that Burnham recognizes that Rayner will call her out if he disagrees, and she kind of needs an opposing force, as Saru said, so that was set up really well. And again, on the thematic level, he is a great juxtaposition to not only Burnham, but also Lorca in the first season of Star Trek Discovery. So I'll be curious to see how that goes. Overall, I think this is a really fun episode. I had a lot of joy with it, and I feel like if this is the type of energy that this season is going to capture going forward, I am full in on this. This was a lot of fun. Excited to see where this is going to go. I love the treasure hunting vibe. So what did you think of this second episode of this 2-episode premiere? I'd love to hear all your thoughts down in the comments below. But beyond all of that, my friends, I hope you live long and prosper. It's up here behind, not behind my mic there.